Hello and good afternoon. My name is Chanchal Cabrera. I'm a certified horticulture therapist, and you are joining me today on my farm, Innisfree Farm, in the Comox Valley on Vancouver Island. This is the unceded territory of the Comox First Nations people. And we're going to have a cup of tea. So what I want to talk about a little bit today is the history of tea, why tea matters. You can tell from my accent that I'm originally a Brit, and of course we love our tea at 4 o'clock. It's just past 4 o'clock today when we're filming, but we're going to have a cup of tea together and talk about how to use tea as a horticulture therapy activity in the garden. So tea means lots of different things to lots of different people. Here I've written up the Latin name of the classic tea plant, the tea that you drink with your grandma, Earl Grey tea, Lapsang Souchong, Darjeeling, the classic black teas, also the green teas. Now, in different countries and different cultures where tea is drunk, there are similar names. So in some countries, tea is cha, like in Japan, for example. Or in India, we have chai. And of course, in the English language, we talk about tea. Now this kind of tea, Camellia sinensis, gives us a lot of different types of tea. So the classic tea, as I mentioned, the Earl Grey, the Lapsang Souchong, the Darjeeling, that's what we would call a black tea. Black tea has actually been picked and allowed to oxidize. So it's a little bit of an aging process, and it oxidizes and turns black. You can also, of course, get green tea. Green tea is drunk widely throughout Asia, and it is the same leaf as the black tea, but picked and then steamed so that no oxidation can happen. And what that does, it retains some of the flavonoids, which are the antioxidant aspect. So you've probably heard about green tea as a medicine, as an antioxidant medicine, and that is specifically those flavonoids. When you oxidize it to turn it to black tea, they become tannins, and so black tea has a much higher tannin content, a more astringent quality to it. And you can see that in your teacups. Your black tea will stain the teacup and your green tea won't. That's the tannins coming out of the tea and settling on the sides of the teacup. So we have green tea that is steamed or cooked, if you like, in the processing. We have the black tea that's oxidized. There's also oolong tea and white tea, and those are picked very, very young. So the earliest flush of spring tips, and that makes the white or the oolong a very delicate tea with very little caffeine, very little tannin. And then you have a few other interesting teas from Asia, for example, bancha, which is from Japan, and it's the second flush, so it's the second harvest of the year. We have hoji cha, which is, there's your cha, that's tea. Hoji cha is actually a roasted tea, so it has a really nice, rich, nutty flavor, quite a dark color. You have kuki cha from Japan also, which is the stems, and then the stem of the tea plant. And then some people are familiar with genmai cha, which is green tea with roasted rice. And those are just a few of the popular tea blends that have come from Asia over into North America, into Europe, and have become very popular drinks. For a reason, the green tea again has that antioxidant, health-giving property, lots of anti-cancer activities in there. But tea itself is a refreshing, invigorating beverage. It does have some caffeine, a very small amount, not like a coffee, but it does have some caffeine in it. But tea also has a very special compound in it. This is an amino acid called theanine. And theanine is a relaxant. It's only found in green tea, at least so far, that's what we know. And where the caffeine is a stimulant and lifts you up, the theanine calms you down. It's available now in a supplement to take at bedtime to help with sleep. But I would suggest, here's my Brit coming out, that you can drink tea in the morning to get up and uplifted and energized for the day. As your cortisol levels are rising, you utilize the caffeine to give you the lift. But as your physiology comes down towards the end of the day, slowing things down, you utilize different aspects of the tea plant. You'll get more of the theanine out. So you can indeed drink that cup of tea in the morning to get up and a cup of tea to go to bed with and feel calm and relaxed. So let's talk for a minute about making tea, how to make tea, why does it even matter how we make it. And first of all, I want to show you the tea that I'm drinking. Now, I'm just drinking it from a big water mug right now. I have a big pot of tea going. But I thought I'd show you the tea I'm drinking, which is actually a medicine tea. So I made myself a blend This is actually for high blood pressure because I got a little stressed this summer in a couple of ways and decided I needed to calm down. So I have a tea here, which is linden blossom and hawthorn flowers. Oops, if I can find them in there, little flowers. Got hawthorn flower and hawthorn leaf and some dandelion leaf. So this is a tea, just as much as the green tea or the black tea. It's a herbal tea, but after all, they're all plants, aren't they? They're all herbs, really. So again, this one is linden, hawthorn flower and leaf, and dandelion leaf. And it tastes quite pleasant. I'm actually quite enjoying my medicine, which is rather a nice thing to be able to say. So making a cup of tea like that, to make a pot of tea that's either medicinal or just for pleasure, the main thing you want to have is really, really boiling water. Now with green tea, it is often suggested to wash the tea. Sounds a bit odd. But what you're doing there is you pour the boiling water over and then you let it steep for 1 minute. And you actually toss that water out and put fresh boiling water, and it's the second soak that gives you the flavour without some of the astringency and the bitterness that green tea can have. So you might in some cases want to do a fancy procedure like that. For the most part, we just literally put the tea in the teapot and pour on the boiling water. How easy was that? English tea, afternoon tea, you're probably going to heat your teapot, pour the boiling water in the teapot first, pour it out, and then put your tea and your fresh boiled water. So your teapot is hot, your tea stays as hot as possible. One thing I will say with tea is you should always have the lid on. When you're steeping your tea, you should always have the lid because the steam will rise. It's bringing all the volatile components up. They're tasty. You want them. They're also often medicinal. So they will condense inside the lid and drop back into the collecting vessel, into the teapot, into the cup, so that you retain all of the medicine and all of the flavor if you have the lid on. So there are two ways of making tea, at least for herbal medicine. You can have an infusion or a decoction. The end result is very similar, but with the infusion, what you do is simply steep the herbs. So you put your herbs in a pot, could be a china teapot, something like this. This is my big family-sized teapot. Or it could be a pan or any kind of china or glass or metal container. Put your herbs in, pour the boiling water over, put the lid on, steep it for 5 to 15 minutes usually. That's all it takes to make an infusion. To make a decoction, however, you are going to simmer. So what happens with a decoction, and we're just going to show you one right here, right now. I've got an electric hot plate here. I'm going to just do a small amount here, water, just plain water. I want to do about, oh, that was pretty close, 500 ml, half a litre. Put that on, get the heat going, and then the herb I've chosen to show you today is burdock. So this is from our garden, harvested here. And rather a nice sample, because if you buy these herbs in the stores, they're sometimes a bit chopped very fine and broken up, and you can't even see what you've got. But this is burdock root. So we harvested that last year, and oh, that smells amazing. It smells spicy and earthy and sweet and really quite delicious. I can't say it tastes quite as nice as it smells. It has quite a strong earthy taste. But what we want to do, I'm actually going to make you a medicinal strength decoction, and this is not necessarily the most delicious because it's strong. So for medicinal strength, I've got half a litre, 500 mils of water, and I want to have 30 grams of my root. That's 30 grams in there of the root, and we're literally going to pop it in the pan and let it come to the boil. So again, those proportions, 500 mils of water, 30 grams of root. That is a standard medicinal strength tea. So that isn't necessarily what you're going to make for pleasure, because that will be quite strong, and it's definitely not the proportions for green or black tea, because that would be probably very unpalatable. So this is, if burdock was the main medicine that you wanted to take for your benefit, for your health benefits, it has properties of supporting the liver and the bowel. It feeds the good gut flora. It's a little bit of a detox herb. If this is a primary medicine for you, then 30 grams in 500 ml would be about right. If you're making it for pleasure, it might be quite a bit less than that. When I make my tea to drink myself, I don't actually weigh and measure it. So let's see, I can show you what I would normally put in my teapot, and let's get a measure on it and have a figure out how much that is. So that's about the right amount. That's 10 grams. So you can see that it is very, I'll pour it back into here so you can see the amount. That is very little herb actually, but it is fluffy. So it takes up a lot of space. So that is ample for me, for my daily tea. That will make quite a strong tea actually. And that wouldn't be enough if that was the only thing I needed to treat a particular health condition, but it would definitely be a good adjunct to some other herbs that you might be taking in more concentrated form. Because that's not very concentrated, when you make a tea, you're only getting out certain constituents that are water soluble, and they aren't necessarily always the strongest of the medicines. So let's just come back to this for a moment and talk about when we would make an infusion or a decoction. The infusion is used for flowers, for leaves, and the soft parts of a plant, anything that's delicate or soft, and it's just steeped. But if you've got woody stuff like that root or seeds or barks, then you need to simmer to get more of the medicine out. And you'd simmer for about 10 to 15 minutes. Very, very low. This isn't a hard boil, it's just the lowest simmer for about 10 to 15 minutes, and then that will be your daily medicine. So some advantages of our water-soluble extractions, our teas. Why would people bother to make a tea? It does pull out water-soluble constituents, so anything, if you're looking for certain medicinal value, then it will pull out certain water-soluble constituents. It's very easy to make a tea. It's very available to people if you want to encourage people to drink more fluids, to be a bit more engaged with their own medicines, even to participate in their own health. Drinking a tea is a very easy entry point for that, a very easy way in. It's very versatile. You can do all sorts of things with your tea once you've made it. Of course you can drink it, but you can also use it as a hair rinse. So chamomile tea for blonde hair and rosemary tea for dark hair. You can do a foot bath, a peppermint tea for tired, hot feet at the end of a long hike. Lovely, refreshing thing to do. Or you can use it as a gargle, as a skin wash, all sorts of different ways that you can use your tea aside from just drinking it for pleasure. The disadvantages of making teas, they don't all taste good. So sometimes that's a bit off-putting to people, and then we might put other things in to make it taste better. There's a little bit of a hassle, a little bit of effort for people to have to boil water or measure their herbs. I'm just turning that right down now. The other drawback to teas is that they have a short shelf life. So once you've made your herbal tea, you have just a day or two to use it up. So 24 to 48 hours, keeping it in the refrigerator. There's no preservatives here, so you don't want to start growing a science experiment and giving it to somebody. So you want to keep it just a couple of days and then get rid of it and start again. So in the sense of horticulture therapy, how could we use this in a practice with our clients in the garden? Well, first of all, the setup is very simple. You need a teapot, you need a tea strainer, at least that's how I like to do it, because I like to have my tea loose in the pot where there's lots of movement of the water around the plant material, and then strain it out when it's time to drink. And of course, you need a pretty teacup. For horticulture therapy, some of the ways you can bring tea into the practice would be to, for example, host a tea party and have people talk about the tea that they like or the tea that they remember their grandma drinking. Bring out the vintage china. I buy these in the charity stores. But people love drinking tea out of fine china, and it might even elicit some memories. People come here. I have a very large collection of these teacups, and people will literally come and say, oh, my grandmother had that one, and I remember being a little girl and drinking that from that tea set. So it can bring up memories. So in the horticulture therapy practice, that is sometimes a great conversation opener to start talking about the cup. Why did you choose that cup? What was it that drew you to that particular cup? So there is a little bit of socializing that can happen around having a cup of tea, sharing a cup of tea. So as well as those social benefits of sharing a cup of tea and a conversation, in horticulture therapy, we're always looking for a little bit more. We're looking for cognitive benefits, physical benefits. So a wonderful project, if you have space in your garden program, is to grow a few herbs for tea. Now you can grow green tea. I have a beautiful green tea plant here, and I do harvest little bits from it. I haven't made a big harvest yet. But all sorts of other plants lend themselves to easy cultivation and easy harvest and delicious teas. So lemon balm, of course, all the mints, spearmint, peppermint, stevia is quite easy to grow. It is an annual in our climate here in zone 7, but a tiny, tiny pinch of the stevia leaf in your cup is incredibly sweet. The linden is a beautiful big tree. That's what's in my blend here, and that's easy to harvest if you have a linden tree nearby. It's a lovely thing to harvest the flowers and the bracts, but just below the flowers, and make tea out of that. You can put in lots of other flowers, rose petals and violet flowers and calendula blossoms and all sorts of things that you can add in or grow specifically to make tea. So if you're looking to make a horticulture therapy program around tea, you're going to start with growing the herbs, preparing the soil, choosing the plants, seeding them or doing cuttings, growing them up, watering them, nurturing them, weeding them, and then of course harvesting them, which is extremely easy. All you're going to need for that is a basket and a pair of scissors. Every day here at our cafe, I make fresh herbal teas where we just pick the plants and put them in a pan of boiled water, heat off, lid on, steep it overnight, and that's our iced tea for the next day at our cafe. So I will go around the garden and just choose whatever's looking good and fresh and tasty in that moment. It's a different tea every time. So again, growing them, harvesting them, drinking them as a fresh tea, but also if you want, you can dehydrate those plants. So you can strip the leaves off the lemon balm, you can strip the leaves off the mint, and then put those in. Just a domestic dehydrator will work on the lowest setting. So ideally, it would be under 30 degrees. Most dehydrators go to about 35, and it's okay. It'll dry them pretty quickly, and then they can be stored for the winter to make the teas from the dried plant material. You need a little bit less if it's dried. It's more concentrated, actually, because there's no water left in it. Talking of which, how strong has this become? So now it's been decocting. This was my burdock, which has been decocting for about 10 minutes. And there's the spent root. That will just go out to my chickens. I'm sure it keeps them healthy. And then that would be my decoction of burdock. And now I guess I better drink some, hadn't I? Oh look, I've got little herb leaves in my teacup. It's going to be very hot for a moment. But yes, little finger out because it's the fine china. You've got to do it the proper way. Oh, that's quite nice. That's quite savory almost. You could kind of think about using that almost in a gravy or a stock, but it's not an unpleasant tea at all. And I could imagine that would be quite good as a chilled iced tea as well, which is in fact what I did with my beverage here. This has actually got ice in it as well. Most of these can be done that way. And if you like the taste a lot, something like the mints, the lemon verbena, lemon balm, make it extra concentrated, cool it off, and then dilute it down with sparkling water. And that makes a really pleasant summer refreshing drink. So there's just a few ways that you can use tea in your horticulture therapy programs, growing it, making the tea, researching what tea is and tea in other cultures. And then, because also in horticulture therapy we're often looking for fundraising opportunities, you could indeed host a tea party and invite people to come in and buy biscuits and tea. You could even make little tea sachets and use those for fundraisers. So all sorts of ways that a simple cup of tea can bring an immense value to horticulture therapy.